Welcome back. I am delighted to welcome you to the Global Leaders Dialogue on Energy. The private sector is instrumental in advancing sustainable energy solutions and working towards the clean energy transition that can be an engine for job creation and economic growth. At the end of this week, the UN Secretary General is convening the high-level dialogue on energy under the auspices of the UN General Assembly. It will build a grand coalition of countries, businesses, and civil society to raise ambition and accelerate action on sustainable energy through new and concrete plans. In a conversation with Ulrika Modeer of UNDP, business leaders will share their perspective on how to phase out coal, mobilize finance, and ensure a just transition to advance SDG 7. But first, I am honored to give the floor to Erika Mouynes, Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Panama, to deliver opening remarks.
I would like to thank the UN Global Compact for inviting me to speak today. It is an honor to be here alongside with many distinguished leaders to discuss a topic that is top priority for Panama and private sector's role in shaping a green recovery. The urgency of climate situation is clear. For us, Panamanians, being blessed with one of the most biodiverse countries in the world has also meant shouldering a great deal of responsibility for preserving our natural ecosystems. In fact, Panama is one of the only 3 carbon-negative countries in the world, meaning our forests capture more carbon than the total greenhouse gases that we generate as a country. However, this does not exclude us from commitments outlined in the Paris Agreement, and we have the resolve to moving forward with a bold, sustainable agenda. In Panama, we have developed an ambitious but practical plan called the Energy Transition Agenda to move our economy away from fossil fuels and into clean energy, using 70% renewable energy sources by 2050. Last year, Panama's government approved a strategic roadmap to guide this agenda. It sets a course towards a green energy economy with 4 Ds: decarbonization, democratization, decentralization, and digitization of energy. We're convinced that the private sector has a key role to play in driving progress in these key areas. Tackling climate change is not only the work of governments and nonprofit groups. Rather, it is economic imperative and a major business opportunity. That is why we prioritize public-private consultation and participation to usher a successful energy transition. Panama has established initiatives and incentives to foster the production of renewable energy while creating jobs, protecting its natural resources, and improving the electricity matrix. Companies that invest in new clean energy projects in Panama can be eligible for a tax incentive of up to 25%. Already, emissions from Panama's energy sector are projected to decline by at least 11.5% by 2030 and 24% by 2050. All across Panama, companies are stepping up to do their part to build a more sustainable and resilient future. For example, Panamanian company Tropigas is equipping tens of thousands of families in the most rural parts of the country with gas stoves to replace traditional wood-burning stoves, which contribute to deforestation and emit more carbon dioxide than any other heat sources. Private sector investment in Panama's renewable energy projects, including the largest wind farm in Central America, is lowering the cost of clean power and enhancing the resilience of our electric matrix. The renewable energy investor InterEnergy plans to install 200 electric vehicles charging stations in Panama by the end of this year, which is a major step toward achieving electric mobility. These are just few examples that show the many partnerships Panama is building with an economic and international businesses to increase the supply of clean power, build resilience, and create thousands of jobs in renewable industries. We welcome other companies and investors to join us. Panama recognizes that climate change is an existential threat that impacts us all. That's why sustainability frames our economic policies. But government action alone won't be enough to avert the worst impacts of this phenomenon and put our societies on a path to a more resilient and sustainable future. Moving the needle will also require greater investment and increased partnership between the public and private sectors. I am grateful to the UN Global Compact for organizing today's dialogue to highlight the importance of multi-stakeholder collaboration and explore the private sector's role in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and supporting government in the clean energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you, Erika Mouynes, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Republic of Panama, for this pre-recorded keynote. My name is Ulrika Modeer. I'm Assistant Secretary General with UNDP, United Nations Development Programs, and we have the pleasure of accompanying Panama and many member states across the world as we see enhanced ambition and more actionability. But also, of course, we know, and this is also what we heard from Minister Mouynes, that we need partnerships across the board. And hence, it's very good to see too that we can have this continued dialogue. You would know that this week's high-level dialogue on energy is the first UN global gathering on energy under the auspices of the General Assembly in 40 years. It brings us together to refocus attention and also action on ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. The rapid acceleration of climate change and increased inequalities really present the biggest threat to humanity that we see. And we know that fossil fuels are the leading cause of climate change, with energy consumption accounting for 76% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So a lot to be done there. Today, we spend $423 billion per year in fossil fuel subsidies. This could, of course, be much better spent on investments in social protection, healthcare, education, but also other programs that can accelerate a clean energy future, equitability, and sustainability for all. On the road towards COP26, this dialogue presents an opportunity to deliver a global roadmap to close the energy access gap and hasten this just clean energy revolution that is so essential for health, well-being, and prosperity for both people and planet. The energy transition, as we know, will not be easy, but it is certainly within our reach, and we see a lot of things happening, so we need to keep the pace in this. Solar is now, as we know, the cheapest electricity in history, growing faster than any previous energy technology, nearly doubling its capacity every 2 years. And wind is, as we know, on a similar trajectory. The high-level dialogue is an inspiring and bold energy compact across governments, the private sector and cities, and also financial markets that are seeing and seizing this opportunity and responsibility. UNDP, United Nations Development Program, where I work, sees the evidence of this momentum through our flagship, The Climate Promise, where about half of the 119 countries that we're supporting are actually identifying energy as a key lever for the scaled up climate action that needs to happen here and now and in the close future. To further build on this momentum, we will be launching a global advocacy campaign that will focus on fossil fuel subsidies reforms and also reproposing that fiscal space a few days before COP26 starts. And we hope that this campaign will be able to engage millions of people across the world and give them a good background and understanding what actually can take place if we come together. Now, in today's session, we will discuss the interconnections of private sector investments and the impact in the relation to the UN high-level dialogue on energy. And I have the pleasure to welcome Mr. Francesco Starace, who is the Chief Executive Officer and General Manager of Enel. I will be able to ask you a number of questions so that we can have a better understanding how we can bring things forward. And let me then start on the first discussion or question. and that is about the energy compact on net zero. So my question would be, how does your energy compact relate to your other climate efforts at Enel, such as your science-based targets and the Science-Based Targets Initiative on net zero standards? Over to you, Francesco.
Thank you, Ulrika. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here. They are really closely interconnected. Our energy compact is, let's say, an abstract of our overall business strategy. So if you want, it's a derivative of that strategy itself. It's not something that stands aside. It's completely integrated. In fact, when we say that the compact that we have proposed as a first company to the SDG 7 commitment is composed of several parts. The first one has to do with global gas emission. We are committing to reduce our global gas emissions from 214 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour in 2020 to 82 in 2030, certified under the Science-Based Target Initiative. And this is an 80% reduction overall vis-a-vis 2017. Why are we doing this? And why is it in line with our strategy? It is because we are investing in renewables since many years. And today we have the largest renewable energy fleet privately owned in the world, and the one that is also growing the fastest. And therefore, we have another commitment in the energy compact, which is the one to treble the size of our renewable energy generating fleet from 49,000 megawatts, pretty large, to 145,000 by 2030, pretty large too. So that is the reason why we are decarbonizing. And the other reason is the third commitment we're taking, which is to shut down coal generating facilities by 2027 instead by 2030. So bringing back 3 years the deadline for this capacity to go offline. And finally, there are other two commitments in the compact that are closely connected to our strategy. One has to do with the rapid deployment of a network of charging stations for electric vehicles. Today, we have an overall charging point position of about 186,000 charging points between public and privately owned. And our commitment is to bring this number to 4 million by 2030. So that's a big, seems like a lot, but I think by 2030 we'll be surprised of how many charging points will be around the world, the way electric mobility is going to pick up. And the last commitment has to do with providing access to people. And this is perhaps the one goal that is closest to my heart. I mean, we plan to bring electricity, clean electricity, to 5.6 million more people connected both by rural or metropolitan areas over the period 2020-2030, reducing the gap that today still exists between those that have access to electricity from clean sources and those that do not have any access to electricity at all. So that's in a summary, our commitments and the reasons why they are keenly and strictly connected to our plans is that because our strategy is all about decarbonizing and bringing electricity to everybody in the fastest possible way. Ulrika, I cannot hear you. I think you're on mute.
So let's see. As a company that wants to be at the forefront, thanks, you would already have been aware about the alarms that were actually put forward in the recent IPCC report. And as I said in my introduction, you're fully aware, I mean, the market is changing so rapidly. So we have an evolving drama in front of us where we see the public understanding, investors understanding what's at stake. and a market changing. I mean, when you define your compact, have you had to sharpen your targets, and how do you discuss this also internally and the adjustments that need to be made? And do you foresee that you can come up with even more advanced targets in your company as you in your compact as you described?
Actually, the targets that we have put together this year are an improvement with the targets we had the year before. So if you want, and the reason why that is because constantly the technology evolution is pushing in that direction. So I cannot exclude that, say, a year or two down the road, we will be surprised how much progress we have made, and also what kind of, let's say, offering and technology solutions will be around that might help us in shortening this time. I should add, for example, that a year ago, we had not a clear view of what the Fit for 55 package that the EU has just launched under the new Commission would push. And I think, for example, that Fit for 55, which has yet to go through the full procedure of the EU, which is going through the Council and then the Parliament. But if we assume that it would go through the way it is, definitely would have an impact in accelerating this transit, because it would give clarity in terms of carbon pricing. It would be giving clarity in terms of accelerating the phasing out of internal combustion engine from at least the European market. It would give clarity also to what kind of sustainable finance tools would be made available for people that have sustainable investments in their portfolio. So that could be an acceleration factor for maybe next year commitments. I agree, it's possible.
Yeah, indeed. And my next question is alluding to this. I mean, the UN Secretary General has said that the European Union has showed the way to the climate front with its Green Deal and the commitments that you mentioned now, even though we don't see yet, what is actually going to be implemented. So what kind of incentives, including also financial incentives, has the European Green Deal created for you if you look at this transition? And also how are you supporting ambitious policies at the national and regional level? Could you elaborate a bit on that?
I think what the EU has done basically two things. It has given an indication that is absolutely unequivocal about what direction an industry should go. So there is no more a doubt that transition to a decarbonized electricity and a deep electrification of society are two tools that will drive the economy to a new level of growth and in parallel decarbonize the life of people and the society itself. So for the first time, I think it is super clear, at least in a part of the world, which is Europe, that the economic advantage of this transition is coupled with the environmental benefits it brings about. So there is no more trade-off or a compromise between these two things. It's good for the environment, but it's also good for business. It should be done. So that, I think, is the most important, let's say, message, and also the most important strategic direction in which the EU is pointing. Now, I think it will remain to be seen what kind of emulation of what kind of velocity the other parts of the world will deploy the same strategy, because it's clear that this theme is going to be played around the world pretty soon. So I think the US and the large Japan and the large industrial part of the world will have to follow suit, because it is a competitive advantage. Now, that, I think, in itself is the biggest change. As far as tools are concerned, I think the only new important tool is the fact that we can couple financial instruments with the commitments of private or public sector to meet or not SDGs targets. And that is a big change, and that is a big tool, because there is an incredible appetite for investment out there.
Yeah. No, thank you. And certainly, I mean, I think both among policymakers, politicians, but also companies, we need leadership. And as we can see these win-win narratives really being understood also among the broader public, then is when the shift can start to happen. And while the EU is now taking leadership, we know that much more needs to be done on behalf of all parties, also given the responsibility of the G20 countries. I had also a question with regard to coal phase out. The EIA's new net zero by 2050 roadmap for the energy sector clearly, as we know, signals that a fossil fuel phase out is inevitable, as we know. And from 2021, new oil or gas fields approved for development, or new coal mines or mine extensions. What are some of the key lessons for countries and companies who are still heavily dependent on coal, as we are moving into discussions also on other fossil sources?
Well, I think the key lessons are super clear. Look at the massive write-offs that the European energy sector has done in the past years. And they are the result of wrong policies or lack of foresight, or if you want, slowness to adapt to what technology was bringing about. Try not to do the same mistakes. I mean, it's possible to have a mistake here and there, but by and large, the technology evolution of the sector has clearly indicated that certain technologies are out of the money. And it's not the fault of someone, it's just a fact. So it's best just to acknowledge it and stop while you can, rather than just keep running at it and then having to write off the same mistakes in a shorter time than you ever think, because this is going to be extremely fast.
Yeah. This is very likely, and no one would want to see these stranded assets. I alluded to in the very beginning, and you're, of course, I know, fully aware of this, that, you know, it's about people and planets. It's about also just transition. So we know that B20 Energy and Resource Efficiency Task Force is also looking, and you have shown an interest in the issue of inequalities and how to deal with the just transition. And as a company, you're looking at how to take bold steps to transition to clean energy. But how are you then looking at the people aspect of this movement forward? Do you have any thoughts to share on that?
Well, I think, you know, we had a big example of that in our company, because clearly we were heavily dependent from fossil fuels, and we shifted completely, we pivoted, as today we say. But while doing that, we also had a lot of people in the company that their work depended on this thermal generation and these fossil-driven technologies. So we wondered, how quickly can we do this change if these people are not on board? And how fast can this happen if these people are not collaborating or not convinced that this is a good idea? Obviously, the answer would have been, it would probably take more effort, and it would take a longer time, and it would probably destroy value along the way. So I think it's totally legitimate that in a big transition like the one we have today, which is not just the generation of electricity, but it's in general the electrification of society. Okay, take the incredible transition, for example, of the electric mobility, which is, you know, changing from the inside the whole automotive sector of the world. Well, you have to tell people the truth, that one technology is coming and the other technology is going, but not their life, not their job. They have to adapt and they have to change, and give them the tools and the opportunity to train back or to change completely their job. Without addressing this, it's their interest, and it's totally legitimate that they try to slow this down. So in order to not have this kind of counterproductive force, which will damage everyone, including themselves, it's best to acknowledge what's happening and also provide a solution, which we did in our company for our workforce. And I think it's in the context of the benefits that the transition is bringing about, completely valid point that enough resources are set aside to shift people from one job to the other or to retrain them for different roles. Without that, it will take more turbulence. It will happen anyway. It will only be more turbulent and more will destroy more value. But there's no doubt that we have today a great opportunity, because I think for the first time probably in the history, it's happening so quickly that people can react in their lifetime. So it's possible to have this change in a shorter time because we understand it right now.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. I don't think we should underestimate people's ability to understand if we can have an informed discussion.
Absolutely.
And of course, this is a responsibility also for public institutions and for politicians to make sure that we have this comprehensive story. And of course, if it can be done in public-private partnerships in different ways, that opens up a lot of possibilities as well. So, I mean, representing, as I do, a big global public institution, the United Nations, I mean, what would you wish for when you look at the future? You see these problems, but also a lot of possibilities. So when you are to address public institutions in different countries at national level, local level, regional level, but also internationally in relation to the UN, how can we be of support to see to that we, together with the private companies, but also investors, can make sure that people actually believe in this future, and that while it will be different, it will be actually more promising and more sustainable in many different ways?
I think the narrative that comes from your institution is fundamental, because it has to focus on the next 10 years and not in the science fiction movie of far away, because today we are playing this card and today we have an incredible chance. So the next 10 years, that's all we have to really focus about. And also the narrative that there is no more a trade-off, but it's rather a synergy between this transition and climate and giving power to the people, giving energy to everybody. I think that is the key point, and it's the change of the narrative when you look at the past. You know, the past was, it's expensive, but it's good for the planet. Now we're not saying this. We're saying it's value creating and it's good for the planet. So let's focus on that. Let's change this part of the story because it's not totally understood and there is a lot of misconception around this.
Yes, and I would also say that we suffer sometimes also of the misinformation and disinformation. So we, I think, have to really offer that narrative, but also a lot of concrete insights that people can understand. And that makes it also possible for decision makers to create that enabling environment that you would need as investors, but also as companies. So with only some few minutes left, I mean, is there anything on your mind that you would really like to share with the audience in the session here today? I guess you have had the opportunity to accompany the interview.
Maybe what we can add is that the acceleration of this transition is not something to be underestimated. It is going to keep accelerating. So what we think will happen in 2030 will probably take place in 2027. The rule of thumb is 30% less time than what today you project. That's what's going to happen. So why I'm saying this is this is valid both ways, for the good and the bad. So when you look at the catastrophic prediction of the IPCC and what today is the trend we observe, unfortunately, in front of us, let's not think that this will go away because we are getting better. It's not going to go away that quickly. It's time to act, and it's time to act fast. Technology helps a lot, but we have to change our habits. The tools that we have in our hands belong to a past that was moving with a slow pace when compared to what we need to do. So we have to change the governance of the ESG acronym. On the E, I think we're all together. On the S, we start to understand that there is a common ground. On the G, which is the boring part of the acronym, there is a lot of work that needs to be done by governments. And I think it's their it's their part of this equation. Simplify, streamline what needs to be done in order for investments to change our economy deeply. Without that, it will happen anyway, but it will happen in a turbulent and slow manner, and therefore it will require a lot more money, a lot more effort.
Thank you so much, Francesco. And it's really great to listen to you. And I think also for decision makers to see, as we know that among business leaders, there are also a number of people across the world who are drivers of this change that needs to happen, but that are also calling out for the importance of that political enabling environment, the governance part of the ESG models where we need to improve. And I think the SDGs show us the roadmap. So thank you so much for this discussion, and looking forward to accompany you and your company onwards as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Erika.
Thanks.
Okay, if you are just joining us, welcome to Uniting Business Live and the UN Private Sector Forum. I'm Tolu Olubumi, your host and guide. You can follow all of the chat right here on the platform, as well as on social media using the hashtag Uniting Business. Once again, we are thrilled to have you here on our interactive event platform, and I encourage you to take some time over the next 3 days to use its many exciting and innovative features, including the event chat, which is located on the right side of your screen. Be sure to say hello to the other attendees and mention where you're from. We've made it easy to connect with your fellow attendees. You can see them in the attendee tab, also on the right side of your screen. You can send private messages and even invite them for a video chat. The networking section is in the navigation bar also, and allows you to connect over video with other attendees and make new connections. You can even share contact information. Give it a try. You might just make some new friends. If you have not done so yet, there is an expo area that you should definitely visit. Our 9 sponsors will be showcasing their sustainability work and hosting their own live sessions. Be sure to use the links to find more information on each company. Also in the expo area, you will find UN Global Compact Studios featuring information on our LGBTQI+ gap analysis tool, our gender equality e-learning courses, and SBTI's Taking the Temperature report. In the Engage Locally studio, Global Compact's local networks are sharing the work that they are doing on the country level to promote the SDGs. So, as you can see, we have worked very hard to put together an innovative, engaging, and informative virtual event. Please take the time to explore the full range of opportunities to learn, engage, and network over the next 3 days.